Now in Mark chapter 10, we come to a turning point. The scene's going to shift dramatically. Up until Mark chapter 10, and down around verse 33, Jesus and the disciples have spent most of the time in Galilee. The book of Mark is focused solely on what happened in the northern part of where the Jews lived in Galilee, and of course they also went at times into Syria, which was even further north, and a little bit to the east. But the center was in Galilee. But now they're heading to Jerusalem. So if we start in verse 32 of Mark 10. And they were in the way going up to Jerusalem, and Jesus went before them, and they were amazed. As they followed, they were afraid. Now you get the idea here. It makes a point that Jesus was leading them. It's like they were reluctant to go because they were amazed. And they were afraid. They didn't really want to go, but Jesus was leading them that way, so they were following him. And then at the end of that verse, he says, "And he took the 12 and began to tell them what things should happen unto him." Now, that's not the first time he said this. He says, verse 33, "Behold, we go up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man shall be delivered unto the chief priests and unto the scribes, and they shall condemn him to death, and shall deliver him to the Gentiles, and they shall mock him, and shall scourge him, and spit upon him, and shall kill him, and the third day he shall rise again." He tells them exactly what's going to happen in detail. Tells them how he's going to be treated. He's going to be mocked. He's going to be beaten. He's going to be spit upon. He's going to be crucified. They're going to condemn him. All that is laid out in detail for them. But remember, they didn't really believe it. They didn't really understand it. If they had, their reaction would have been completely different when these events actually occurred. So they heard it, and so because of this, they were scared and they were amazed. And they were sort of didn't know exactly what to do. This was a complete change for them. But on the way there, verse 35, and James and John, the sons of Zebedee. Let's see if I can catch this thing up. And it tells us in Matthew that their mother was involved too. James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came unto him saying, "Master." Now they're asking for a favor, they're asking for a request. Now notice what they ask for. "Master, we would that thou shouldest do for us whatever we shall desire." And it's always dangerous to say, "Sure, what do you want?" Because you may get yourself in a trap. But Jesus says, "And he said unto them, What would you that I should do for you?" And they said, "Grant unto us that we may sit one on thy right hand and the other on thy left hand in thy glory." What are they asking for? They're asking that he would give them the most prestigious positions other than himself in the coming kingdom. They would be his literally right hand and left hand man. They would be sitting, you can think about this in terms of a king and a court. They would be seated on his right and left, probably a little bit lower than he was, but they would be the top two people in the entire kingdom. So they're asking for a significant position. And the very fact that they're asking this shows us that they're still thinking that Jesus has come to establish an earthly kingdom and all that goes with that, a government, ruling, riches, wealth, prestige, power, all that sort of stuff. And they are asking him to grant to them the two most powerful positions other than his own in this coming kingdom. Now, notice his answer. Notice what he doesn't say. He doesn't say to them, that would be in verse 38. He doesn't say to them, "Oh, no, wait a minute, you misunderstood. There isn't going to be any kingdom like that. There's not going to be such a thing as somebody that has authority and power that I've granted them under my rule, under my leadership. There isn't going to be a king. He doesn't tell them that at all. What he says is this, "But Jesus said unto them," verse 38 now, "You know not what you ask." You don't know what you're asking for. You don't understand what's going on here. You just don't know what you're asking for. He says, "Can you drink of the cup that I drink of and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with?" Now, what's he referring to? Well, he's referring to the cup of God's wrath. Remember when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane, he prayed, "If it be possible, let this cup pass from me." And the cup he's talking about is the wrath of God. Remember, the Old Testament talks several times about in Revelation, talks about the wrath of God, a cup being poured out of God's wrath upon people. And so that's what he's talking about. Baptized with the baptism I'm baptized with. What's he talking about? He's talking about what's coming. He's just told them about it back in verse 34. But that's what he's talking about. Of course, they don't know that. They don't understand that. They have even though he's told them more than once, they still don't get it. So they're not thinking that way at all. And they said, verse 39, we can. They're completely confident. Oh yeah, anything you go through, we can go through too. We're not, there's no problem here. And Jesus says unto them, you shall indeed drink of the cup that I drink of, and with the baptism that I am baptized withal, shall you be baptized. He tells them indirectly, refers to the fact, yes, you are going to be persecuted for my sake. In fact, we know that James was beheaded, was the first of the apostles that was beheaded. That's recorded for us in Acts. John, of course, lived a long life, but he was eventually exiled to the Isle of Patmos off of Greece because of his stand for the Lord. So he says, yeah, you're going to experience the same kinds of things. No, you're not going to be crucified for the sins of the world. You're not going to drink the cup of God's wrath, but you are going to go through significant troubles. You don't understand it. You don't have any idea what's coming. You're thinking about a kingdom where you're going to be like the powerful men in the kingdom and all that goes with that, power, prestige, riches, authority, all that kind of stuff. But that's not what's going to happen. You're going to go through the same things I go through. Of course, not in the same degree and for the same purpose, but that's what's happening to them. And then in verse 40, he tells them, but to sit on my right hand and on my left hand is not mine to give. And notice, he doesn't say it's not going to happen. He just says, I don't have the power to grant that wish. I mean, the inference is, yes, there is going to be somebody who's going to have power and authority in this kingdom that I am going to establish, but I don't know who it's going to be. I don't at this point in my time, I don't have the power to grant that to anybody. It says, but then he goes on and says, but it shall be given to them for whom it is prepared. Now, that's, if you take that what Jesus tells them as a whole, it makes it very clear. Yes, Jesus is saying there is going to be an earthly kingdom. It's going to happen because it's already been prepared for somebody to have those positions of authority and prestige and power that goes with it in an earthly kingdom. But it's not going to happen now. I'm not going to establish an earthly kingdom now, but there's one coming in the future because he says it's already been prepared. It's already set up. We already know, it's already known. God's already decided this. It's already been foreknown. It's all set up. It's just that I got to drink this cup. And I'm going to be baptized with this baptism that you don't understand, even though I've told you it's coming. And in fact, they didn't understand it when it happened. And yes, you're going to go through some very difficult trials too, just like I am. That's what's coming. You don't understand it. You don't know it. And you glibly said, oh, sure, we can go through what you're going through, not having any clue what you were committing yourself to. But there is going to be a kingdom. It's just not going to happen yet. And of course, we see that that's obviously true, but he indicates that someday there will be. Now look at verse 41. This is the part we'll focus on. When the 10 heard it, well, what do you suppose their response would be? How would you feel? Remember, Peter had just asked him, we talked about this last week. He said, look, Peter asked him, and this is back in verse 28 of Mark 10, we've given up everything for you. What are we going to get in return? Is what he basically asked. And Jesus, of course, answers that question. So the 10 are pretty upset. And you can see why. Who are you? What business do you have coming to James and John and their mama? What business do you have coming and asking for this great favor? What's with us? What are we? Just like, chopped liver or whatever? How we have as much right to that position as you do. How can you come along and try to insert yourself and exalt yourself this way when you're ignoring all of us who've also given up everything and are following him? And even though we are scared and amazed, we're still following him to Jerusalem. He's leading us there, and we're right behind him. And so they were displeased. And you can see why. Again, all 12 of them are thinking earthly kingdom. They're not thinking, oh, wait a minute, James and John, you misunderstood. That's not what's going to happen here. No, they're thinking the same thing, and they're upset because these two men have exalted themselves, pushed themselves to the front of the line, and the other 10 are like, you can understand that. I'm sure all of us can understand why they were upset. Okay, so Jesus now has got Again, it's not the first time this has happened. This kind of thing has happened. Jesus again has a situation where his disciples are squabbling with each other over something that he knows is completely ridiculous and completely immaterial, but they don't know that, so they're at odds with each other. I don't know if they came to blows or not, but they're certainly upset, and you can see why they would be, given their mindset. So Jesus has to deal with this. So once again, he goes through that. Remember, he's done this before. Remember, he called a little child and said, you got to be like this, you want to enter the kingdom of God. He did that on 2 occasions. Okay, so in verse 42, Jesus has to quell this argument, deal with this. And he called them unto them, and he said unto them, you know that they which are accounted to rule over the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, and their great ones exercise authority upon them. Now, we all know that. Every government that's ever been runs that way. Somebody's at the, some pigs are more equal than others. Somebody's at the top of the pyramid, and they exercise authority over those that are below them. And sometimes that authority is cruel and malicious. Sometimes it's benevolent, but that always happens. In fact, it wasn't just Gentiles. It was also Jews that did the same thing. You can read the Old Testament, read about the kings and so on. So this is a common thing. All governments operate that way. I mean, there have been a few people that have tried to experiment with governments where everybody's equal, and it never works and it never lasts. So he's just telling them, this is what goes on. This is what you see everywhere. And so and by inference, it's only natural that you would think that the same thing is going to happen in an earthly kingdom where I am the head, because that's what happens in all kingdoms. But then verse 43, but so shall it not be among you. Not like this. It's not a matter of who exercises authority. It's not a matter of who has the power. It's not a matter of who has the wealth. That's not the issue here. This is completely different. But whosoever shall be great among you shall be your minister. He turns it upside down. In the Gentile world and in the Jewish world too at the time, and in fact in all governments throughout all of time, whether you be some tribe in the middle of the Amazon or whether it be the United States of America, you have this situation where there are some people in power and they exercise authority over us. And he says it's exactly the opposite. In my kingdom, it's not going to be those who exercise authority. It's going to be those who serve others. The focus is not on amassing power and wealth and rich wealth and so on to yourself. It's going to be those who put others above themselves and therefore think of themselves and act as servants to others. Those are the people that are going to have the positions. Those are the ones that are going to be great in my kingdom. Again, this is at odds with everything throughout all of history. He says my kingdom is not going to be like an earthly kingdom you're familiar with. It's going to be completely different. Verse 44, he continues that. And whosoever you shall be chiefest shall be servant of all. And then he uses himself as an example. He says, for even the Son of Man, referring to himself, came not to be ministered unto, not to be served, but to minister, to serve. And then he adds something to that they didn't understand. It's serving to the extent that he is giving his life a ransom for many. He's going to sacrifice himself so that many people could be reconciled to God. He's going to bear the full wrath of God. The cup that he refers to earlier is going to be poured out on him so that those who believe in him, the wrath of God will not be poured out upon them because he's already taken their punishment. He's already dealt with that. God's wrath, God's justice is satisfied in him. So not only is he coming to serve, he's coming to make the ultimate sacrifice, sacrificing his life, and even which other people have done. Occasionally you find someone who has sacrificed their life for others, like in time of war or something or whatever. That happens. It's unusual, but it does happen. But he's going further than that, because he's not just sacrificing his life, he's also taking the full force of God's wrath, which no one else has ever done. He's the only person that could ever have done that on the behalf of others. So he's telling them, if you're going to be in my kingdom and you want to be great in my kingdom, then you humble yourself. You humble yourself and you become a servant. Of who? Everyone. Now let's look at that. Remember in John chapter 13, let's look at it. John chapter 13, Jesus illustrates this in a very dramatic fashion. Remember, this is the night before he's arrested. And he washes the disciples' feet. So verse 3 of chapter 13 of John. Jesus, knowing that the Father, now look at this. Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands. What does that say? Jesus, knowing that God had delivered him everything. He was powerful. He was ruler. He was Lord. Knowing that that's what God had done and that he was come from God and went to God. So, now remember, that's the foundation of which Jesus is acting. That knowledge that he was from God, he was going back to God, that all things were delivered in his hand. That's the foundation from which he's operating. He's not operating from foundation, well, I'm just a nobody that's here and don't, no. He's operating from a position of enormous strength and power. Verse 4, he rises from supper and laid aside his garments and took a towel and girded himself. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel with which he was girded, which with he was clothed. He lowered himself to the lowest possible position, even though he knew, it says in verses 3, that he had been given all things. He was returning to the Father, back to glory that he had come from. But even then, he still lowers himself to this place of a menial servant who is stooped to the point where he's just washing their dirty feet. How many times have you washed somebody's dirty feet? I suppose those of you married may have done it a few times, or maybe you've done it to a child. This is not some ritual he's doing. He's demonstrating his servanthood because he's washing their dirty feet. Now think about whose feet he's washing. He's washing the 12 disciples. Who's in that group? Judas Iscariot's in that group. He's washing Judas Iscariot's feet. He's stooped himself to lower himself to wash the feet of a man who hates him, who's going to betray him in just a few hours. And Jesus knows that, because it's clear later he says, one of you is the devil, and Judas leaves. But that hadn't happened yet. So he's lowering himself to wash the feet of someone who's a sworn enemy of his, of someone whose actions are going to result in his arrest and eventual death. Not just those who liked him, not just those who loved him, not just those who were following him, but he made no distinction between them. Now in verse 12, he explains it. So after he had washed their feet and taken his garments and was sat down again, he said unto them, Know ye what I have done to you? Understand, he's basically using this as what we call an object lesson, as a parable. He says, do you know what I did? Well, they knew he washed his feet. Sure, they knew that. They were sitting there with clean feet. You call me master and Lord. Now notice, you call me master and you say, well, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and master. Now you see what he just said. You call me Lord and master, and that's right. I am. I am Lord and master. If I then, your Lord and master, have washed your feet, ye also should wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that ye should do as I have done to you. What's a servant? What's a minister that Jesus referred to back in Mark? It's someone who cares for others and serves them, and sometimes in the most menial, lowering yourself, humbling yourself fashion you can think of. I've given you example, verse 16, verily, verily, I say unto you, the servant is not greater than his Lord. Now, the context, who's the Lord? Well, that would be him. Who are the servants? That would be the 12. The servant, the 12, you are not greater than me. Neither he that is sent greater than he that sent him. Now again, that refers to two things. It would refer to two things. First of all, who sent Jesus? Well, he came of his own volition, but it was through the power of it was through the decision of the Trinity that he came. And so he's saying, I'm not greater, the one who, and then of course it's also true that later in Acts chapter 1, he sends them out to bear witness, be eyewitnesses of what he had done. Then he closes that saying, if you know these things, happy are you if you do them. So what does it mean to serve others? Well, we have this spectacular example. Now listen, as you know, that he's not even talking about the fact, he mentions it briefly, he's not even talking about the humility and the servant heart that he displayed by even coming to earth and living as a perfect God among sinful humans and dealing with all that. That was the greatest act of humility that's ever occurred. I can't imagine anything greater than that. Remember, he came as a baby, as a helpless baby who couldn't do anything for himself. He was completely dependent upon his parents. So he lowered himself as low as he could. A great act of humility. He's not referring to that because that's one we can't relate to. We can't do that, but we can minister to others. We can serve others. So what does it mean to serve others? It means you do whatever you can to the benefit of other people. Look back in Luke. He talks about servanthood again in Luke chapter 12 and verse 35. Now, this is where he talks about, for the preceding verses, where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. And then he says, let your loins be girded about and your lights burning. And ye yourselves like unto men that wait for their Lord, when he will return from the wedding, that when he cometh and knocketh, they may open unto him immediately. Blessed are those servants whom the Lord, when he cometh, shall find them watching. Verily I say unto you that he shall gird himself and make them to sit down to meal, and will come forth and serve them. And if he come in the second watch would be the middle of the night, or come in the third watch, early in the morning. Early in the morning, not 8 o'clock, more like 3 o'clock. And find them so, blessed are those servants. And know this, that if the goodman of the house had known what hour the thief would come, and so on, verse 40, be ye ready therefore also, for the Son of Man cometh in an hour when you think not. So he's saying, now what's this got to do with being a servant? He's telling you, if you're going to be my servant, you must always be watching for me. You must always be ready for me. You must not abandon your servanthood because, I haven't come. You need to keep serving others, and you keep serving others until I return, or until either I come to you or you come to me in death. Now, so let's think about this business of, you often heard about having a servant's heart. What does that mean? What does it mean to be a servant? And Jesus has defined it for us and given us an enormous example of what this is. We got to remember this now, and this happens, and I'm sure that at some point all of us may have fallen into this trap. Servanthood sometimes results in pride. Sort of like Peter said, Lord, we gave up all for you. What are we going to get in return? Look at what we've done. Kind of like that. Look at me. I'm serving others. I'm doing all these wonderful things. I'm not asking for a return on it. I'm just doing it. And, aren't I wonderful? And that's a real temptation when it comes to servanthood. Because, you're helping other people. And then there's also the possibility that, and this has probably happened too, that I'm really doing these things for my own benefit. It makes me feel good about myself. Because look at how I'm humbling myself and how I'm helping these other people. And that just gives me a warm feeling inside because I'm being kind and gracious and I'm doing what God has told me to do and all these kinds of things. So in that case, who are you serving? Person reacts that way. Who are they serving? They're not really serving someone else. They're serving themselves because they're using these actions to make themselves feel better about themselves, to make themselves feel like they have a purpose and so on. It's not It's not a matter of pride. It's not a matter of making myself feel better, or it's not a matter of satisfying some desire I have. It's not a matter of I have this desire to help others, and therefore by serving, I'm satisfying my desire, and therefore I'm pleasing myself. That's not true servanthood as Jesus defines it. That's not servanthood as he displayed it. Remember, the ultimate example on this earth of his servanthood was he went to the cross and death and all that went with that. Now, so how do you define service? How do you think about this? Well, this resonates with me. Maybe it'll resonate with you too. As a servant, I do what I can. I do what I can. I do what I have the ability to do, and I do what I have the opportunity to do. And I do this because God has given me the ability and God has given me the opportunity. I'm not seeking, you're not seeking glory, you're not seeking satisfaction. There's a sense in which you desire to do it because you desire to please God, but you're not doing it just to satisfy your own desires. That's what a true, humble servant is. I do what I can because God has given me the ability to do this and God has given me the opportunity to serve. Probably the best example of that, or the most detailed example we have of that, is Paul himself. The Holy Spirit uses Paul as an example. This is in 2 Corinthians 9. Well, I wrote down the wrong verse. Maybe it's 1 Corinthians 9. Let me check. Yeah, it's 1 Corinthians 9. Sorry, 1 Corinthians 9. 1 Corinthians 9, starting around verse 16. I'll start in verse 13. He's talking about his ministering, his serving to the church in Corinth. Do you not know that they which minister about holy things live of the things of the temple, and they which wait on the altar are partakers with the altar? He's referring back to the Old Testament law, where the sacrifices, the animal sacrifices that were made, most of that sacrifice went to the priest. So they would have food and so on and so forth. They didn't have land. They didn't have much land where they could raise their own crops and so on. So they were dependent upon these sacrifices. So most of it went to them. Not all of it, but most of it. Verse 13. Even so hath the Lord ordained that they which preach the gospel should live of the gospel. So he's drawn an analogy. But I have used none of these things, neither have I written these things that it should be so done unto me. So he says, I haven't taken advantage of that, even though I'm entitled to it. As a priest was entitled to benefit from the sacrifices people brought, I haven't done that. And I'm not writing these things so that you'll say, oh my goodness, we've not treated Paul correctly, we need to be supporting him. And he says, that's not the purpose, that's not what I care about, that's not why I'm doing this. Now look at what he says next. For it were be better for me to die than that any man should make my glory in void. What? For though I preach the gospel, I have nothing to glory of. Now remember, as you know, Paul went through far more difficulties and far more trials than any of us have ever gone through or ever likely to go through. And he did that because he was preaching the gospel. But he said, I have nothing to glory of. For though I preach the gospel, I have nothing to glory of, for necessity is laid upon me. I have to do this. I need to do this. I must do this. Yea, woe is unto me if I preach not the gospel. It says I have to preach the gospel. Necessity forces me to preach it, drives me to preach the gospel. And if I don't respond to that, then woe is me. He goes on. For if I do this thing willingly, I have a reward. I mean, think about this. You have an employer, many of you do, and you work willingly, and sometimes more less willingly than others, but you work willingly and you get a reward. You get a paycheck. If I do this willingly, I have a reward. But if it's against my will, a dispensation of the gospel is committed unto me. He's saying, I have to do this because I can. God has given me the ability to do this. He's given me the command. He's expressly told me this is what I'm supposed to do. He's given me the ability. He's dispensed to me the grace to do this. And so I do this because I can, not because I seek glory, not because I seek support, even though I have a right to it, but because I have to. I don't really have a choice. What is my reward then? Verse 18. Verily this, that when I preach the gospel, I may make the gospel of Christ without charge, that I abuse not the power in the gospel. For though I be free from all men, now notice, yet have I made myself servant unto all, that I might gain the more. Now, when he talks about gain the more, he's not talking about financial gain. Obviously, he's not talking about financial gain. He's not talking about power. He's not talking about prestige. He's talking about those who respond to the gospel that God has given him to preach. And then he goes further. And unto the Jews, I became as a Jew. Well, he was already a Jew. What is he talking about? That I might gain the Jews. To them that are under the law, as under the law, that I might gain them that are under the law. He goes on. To them that are without the law, as without the law, being not without the law of God, but under the law of Christ, that I might gain them that are without the law. To the weak, I become as weak, that I might gain the weak. I am made all things to all men, that I may by all means save some. You see what he's saying? I am serving everyone I can. God has laid this on me. I have to do this. I have to share the gospel. I have to spread the gospel. And I share it to all men. And I want to do so in such a way that they can understand it, in such a way that I identify with the position that they're in, that I'm not trying to impose my own ideas or some other religion on them, but rather that I'm focused on the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ. And that's all I'm doing. Verse 23, and I do this for the gospel's sake, not for his own benefit, not because he somehow got glory or prestige or power from it, not that he got self-satisfaction from it even. Now, of course, there is some satisfaction in serving the Lord. That's true, and I'm sure that he appreciated that. But he's saying, that's not my motive. That's not why I do this. I do this because I can. God has given me the ability and the opportunity, and so I do this for the gospel's sake. Not for my benefit, for your benefit. That's a servant. That's the example. We have the example of Jesus Christ himself, and then we have the example of Paul. That's a servant. I serve others. And I serve others, again, because I can. Now, God tells me that if I truly serve others, that's how you become great in his kingdom. I don't even know what that means. The Bible doesn't tell us what kind of hierarchy or whatever is established in the kingdom. I don't know, but it means that I am doing what God has called me to do, what God has told me to do. You're doing what God has told you to do. You're doing what you can, and you're doing it as you give opportunity. Look at verse 27. But, he's gone through all this, but I keep under my body and bring it into subjection, lest by any means I have preached to others, and I myself should be a castaway. What does he mean by a castaway? He means he's lost the ability, because of his own actions, he has lost the ability to be an authentic representation of Jesus Christ. He's lost the ability to preach the gospel authentically. His own life has betrayed him. Because of the way he has lived, he has kept himself under subjection so that he does not become a bad example, so that he remains a good example, so that his message becomes authentic, because his lifestyle, his life verifies his message. He's the opposite of saying, don't do as I do, do as I say. He's saying exactly the opposite. I control myself. I watch myself. I'm careful about myself because I do not want to lose the God-given authority that he has given me. I do not want to compromise the gospel because of my own actions. I don't want to be someone that people can look at me and say, well, you said this, but you're doing this. He doesn't want to be a hypocrite. That's what he's saying. So what do? We recognize that who do we serve? Well, obviously we serve God, but in the human level. Well, if you're a spouse, the first person you serve is your spouse. And you serve your spouse just like Jesus served his disciples. You have his or her best interest at heart. You, as Paul says, you esteem others more highly than yourself. You esteem her or him more highly than yourself. You care for them. You serve them in any way that you can. Sometimes that's easy. Those of you married know. Sometimes it's easy. Sometimes it's fun. Sometimes it's enjoyable. Sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes it gets nasty, because sometimes they get really sick, and you got to deal with that. If you have children, you serve your children. You serve your children. That would be a second priority. If you're a child, you serve your parents, you serve your siblings, you serve other believers. You serve like Jesus did, who served Judas Iscariot. You serve anybody that you have an opportunity and the ability to serve. And you do so because you can, not because you're seeking something for yourself, not because you're trying to satisfy some desire, not because you want to feel better about yourself. No, no, no. You're doing it like Paul says. I do these things because I have to. God has given me this ability and I must exercise it. Woe is me if I don't. Woe is me if I hold this to myself and refuse to humble myself and serve others. Now, there's one other important point that we need to understand here that is foundational for this business of being a servant. Verse 13, Galatians chapter 5. For, brothers, ye have been called unto liberty. Only use not liberty for an occasion to the flesh, but by love serve one another. For the law is fulfilled in one word, even in this: thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Now he's talking to a church, talking to people like us who are bound to each other in Jesus Christ and are united together in a church, the pillar and foundation of the truth. But if you bite and devour one another, if you fight, if you gossip, if you get into squabbles like the disciples just did, we saw it in Mark 10. If you bite and devour one another, take heed, pay attention, that you be not consumed one of another. You can destroy yourselves. You can destroy the unity you have. You can destroy the love you have. You can destroy the love that you are commanded to exhibit to each other. You can destroy that because you can get caught up in these earthly things and get caught up in all of these differences of opinion, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know what I'm talking about. You can destroy yourselves. This I say then, walk in the Spirit, and ye shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. Walk in the Spirit. Servanthood is a demonstration that you are walking in the Spirit. That's what he's saying. Servanthood, serving one another because you love them, love your neighbors yourself, is a demonstration that you're walking in the Spirit. Squabbles, gossip, slant, whatever. Those are examples of not walking in the Spirit, and therefore they are the opposite of servanthood. Okay, one more thing. Luke chapter 10. This is foundational to the principle of living as a servant that we're all called to do. Luke chapter 10, starting near the end of the chapter, about verse 40. Verse 38. Now here's what, you know this story. Now it came to pass as they went, that would be Jesus and those that were following him. He entered into a certain village, and a certain woman named Martha received him into her house. And she had a sister named Mary, which also sat at Jesus' feet and heard his word. But Martha was cumbered about with much serving and came to him. Now what's going on here? You got guests in your house. You invited them in. There's probably at least a dozen of them, maybe more, I don't know. So Martha's concerned about, these people need something to drink. They may need food. They need a place to sit. They may need a place, I don't know how long they're staying. They may need a place to sit. She's doing all the things that you do all the time when you have guests. I don't know about you, but when we have guests over, that means we have to clean the house. Not that our house is filthy dirty, but it's got to be, just so. And as I've learned over the years, I really can't do that. I can help out, but if she leaves it to me, I don't know what and she's right. This is not something that I'm not very good at this. I don't know about the other gentlemen in the room, but maybe you're not either. I don't know. I can load the dishwasher. I can take out the garbage. I can do that. Okay, so Martha's busy she's serving. She's taking care of these people, which is what she should be doing as a hostess. You've all been there and done that. And so as you know, in verse 40, she complains. She says, Lord, do you not care that my sister hath left me to serve alone? I'm doing all this work and she's just sitting there. Don't you care that I'm working my fingers to the bone and helping you out, serving you? And she's doing nothing. He says, bid her, therefore, that she help me. Tell my sister to get off of her duff and start working. That's what she's saying. Help me out. I need help. Now look at Jesus. And now notice, that's not an unreasonable request. I'm sure that you've made the same request of your spouse or your children or whoever to help you out because you have a lot of work to do. That's nothing wrong with that. But now look at what Jesus says. Jesus answered and said, Martha, 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 thou art careful, you're concerned, and you're troubled about many things. He doesn't say these things are not important. Of course they are. But he says this, verse 42, but one thing is needful. These things you're doing are important and need to be done, but one thing is absolutely critical. This is the foundation of our servanthood, if you want to put it that way. This is the foundation. One thing is needful, and Mary has chosen that good part, which shall not be taken away from her. Meaning, I'm not going to tell her to stop doing what she's doing because she's doing what is really needed. What was needed? Sitting at his feet and listening to him. Sitting at his feet and knowing him. Sitting at his feet and learning of him. Sitting at his feet and focusing on what he was saying. What he's telling Martha is that is more important than your service. Not that your service is disregarded or not necessary, but if you don't have that, if you don't know my words, if you're not sitting and listening to me and hearing me, then your service is secondary. Now, what does that tell us? If I'm going to be a good servant, if I'm going to be a servant that pleases my Lord and Master, if I'm going to be a servant that truly serves others, I have to first of all know him. I have to first of all listen to him. I have to first of all worship him. That's fundamental. I cannot be a truly good servant if I don't know him, if I'm not paying attention to what he says, if I'm not focused upon his word. If that isn't a very high priority in my life, then I really can't be a good servant because I've gotten distracted by all these things that need to be done. And in the process, I have avoided or missed out on or just sort of forgotten about the thing that is absolutely the most important. That's what he's telling Martha. That's what he's telling Martha, and that's why he is praising Mary. So, yes, we're to be servants. Yes, that means we do what we can, what God gives us the ability and the opportunity to do. And don't fall into this false humility thing. You've seen this, maybe done it yourself. Well, I can't really do anything. I'm just an old guy, or I'm just a young, whatever. You can find out some excuse. And I really can't do anything. So, it's not really, I don't want to, I'm just not really, you've all been there at some point, I'm sure, in your life, and others who have. That's not true humility. That's false humility, because yes, there is something you can do. So I know sometimes there's not because of the situation, but in general, you have abilities. God's given you gifts. You have talents. There are things that you can do. And so, but he's telling Martha, if you ignore learning from me, then your servanthood's not worth a whole lot because you've missed the fundamental point of this. You serve me first. And serving me, yes, it means serving others, but it also means you listen to me. You understand what I've given you. You pay attention to it. It is the foundation upon which your service rests. You're not serving others just as an exercise and activity, or just because it needs to be done. You're serving others as a reflection of what you've learned from me. Once again, the Bible's very clear. As a believer, it's not what I do, it's what I am. And what I am is going to reflect itself in service if I have truly served him, if I have truly listened to him, if I have truly understood what he's saying, if I truly care about his word, if I truly sit at his feet and learn from him, then I can be a legitimate servant to others, but it's based on the foundation of truly knowing him. So the first thing we do, the first priority is him. That's the first priority. And then as I know him, as I serve him, as I learn from him, then it spills over. And so then I serve other people as a result of that. It's not in addition, it's not an extra thing. It's not something, if I don't have the foundation, then I've missed the superstructure. It won't stand. Let's pray. Father, help us. You know that we tend to be self-absorbed. You know that we have a tendency toward selfishness. We have a tendency toward pride. We have a tendency toward wanting to do things that please ourselves. We have a tendency toward wanting other people to do things that please ourselves. It's not our natural tendency to serve others. As Jesus told his disciples, That's how the world works. The world doesn't work by serving others. It works by getting others to serve you. But you've told us that your kingdom operates on a completely different principle. Help us, Lord, to truly understand that and to take that to heart. Help us to understand that we serve others because you have given us the ability to do so because we can, and not because of some internal motive that we desire. And above all, Father, help us to depend upon you. Help us, as it were, to sit at your feet and learn of you. Help us to focus our lives around your word. Help us to know your word. Help us to go to lengths to understand it. And help us, Father, to, as you've told us in James, to pray for wisdom. Because if you pray for it, we know that you will give it to us. Father, help us to live lives as servants, not as those who demand respect, not as those who demand that other people serve us, but as those who are truly humble, to the point where we will do whatever you have given us to do, whatever we can do to serve others. Help us, Father, to demonstrate our love for you, our love for each other, and our love for others by the way that we serve them. In Jesus' name, amen.